Well, good morning to you. Um, I hope everybody's doing well today. And I want to talk about the political instability that's going on in Cuba right now. And I want to do this and providing you my insight. And to hear the American media talk about it um, is rah, rah, rah. The Cubans are standing up for and wanting democracy and an end to the communist rule. That is the popular narrative that's being run by the mainstream news. From obviously, yes, Fox News, One American News Network, people like that, but also the CNN and MSNBC crowd are also joining in this narrative. And what passed for news in the United States usually comes from what is called the Washington Consensus, which most of the time these days is not a pretty sight. I'm not here to defend the government of Cuba. Um, as I stated before, I am a socialist. I am. I do not favor capitalism as practiced by the United States, and I do not favor the command economy as is associated with countries like the former Soviet Union um, or today's Cuba. Now, just because I oppose the command economy model of those two countries does not mean that I am sympathetic toward what is called regime change. Because usually, when there is a regime change movement sponsored by the United States, the outcome is usually not good. And the thing about it is, there's more to it than just hoorah, democracy, USA, USA, USA. There's more to that. Um, the right wing in this country wants to rub it in on a narrative that's full of crap. Basically, they're like, you see, they don't want that government run medicine. They can't get medicine because it's that government run system. And you'll hear that kind of mess. And here's the thing, if there's one area I am going to unapologetically praise the Cuban government, would be healthcare. Yes, I don't like the fact that they crack down on civil liberties and crack down on free speech. We have free speech restrictions here in the United States. I do not like the fact that the government tortures political dissidents. Our government tortures political dissidents. I do not like the fact that they execute people in Cuba. Our government still practices the death penalty. You see what I'm getting at? And and people seem to think that just because a country's capitalist, a free enterprise system, therefore it's free. And that's not the case. I'll give you an example of two communist countries. And there's a difference between the two. You have China, the People's Republic of China, which is ostensibly more free market than Cuba. Cuba still has more or less a state-run economy, although they're kind of walking away from that, and there are some um, capitalist, um, small-scale capitalist reforms taking place, free market reforms in Cuba. But it's still relatively a state-run economy compared to, let's say, China today. There's more individual freedom for the people in Cuba than there is in China. I mean, speaking out against your government in Cuba will put you in jail. Speaking out against your government in China will end up with a bullet in the back of the neck. Both the idea of putting people in jail for speaking against your government's bad, but putting a bullet in the back of your neck is worse, considerably worse. So, think about it is they're claiming that people are tired of this communist system and blah blah blah. You know, the whole fried chicken and apple pie, Fourth of July, Americana, USA, 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 whatever. Um, thing about it is, COVID is an is a problem in Cuba, whereas is kind of getting under control here. I mean, in fact, I mean things are looking back to normal around in my area. I mean, not having to wear a mask now like we used to. Still, some places you do, but there's some semblance of normality coming back. Um, Especially since many people are getting vaccinated, and I have gotten my shots. But there are some problems still in Cuba. And thing about it is, one of the reasons there's a problem is that the United States likes to bully Cuba around. And they're having a tough time getting resources because of American action against Cuba. But then I'm going to hear, well, but Cuba is a dictatorship and America is supposed to support freedom. The majority of the dictatorships that exist in the world today supported by the United States. I mean, the United States is even indirectly, and I'm being charitable saying indirectly, the United States is indirectly, basically, and I'm not being a conspiracy theorist, I mean, but they're basically enabling radical terrorism from the Middle East with the arm sales, let's say, of American military hardware to Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia committing a genocide in Yemen, and and the Saudi Arabian government more or less, funding radical Islamist terrorist attacks against the West. So, and that goes back to what the United States is doing. And I hope I will not get banned from this channel or have this video shut down for me. What I think is speaking the truth, and I'm not being a conspiracy nut. Not being a conspiracy nut at all. I mean, look what happened in Afghanistan in the 1980s. The United States called the rebels fighting against the Soviets as freedom fighters. Guess what happened? Those so-called freedom fighters, they became the Taliban, and the rest is history. And we're still in fucking Afghanistan almost after 20 years, and we need to get the hell out. But think about it is that this embargo that's been imposed on Cuba is inhumane, and what it did, even from a Cold War anti-communist perspective, it's the dumbest thing because what it did, it people realized that the United States is committing a war against them, and it actually is a morality booster for the regime that they end up supporting the Castro regime. So, from a State Department mindset, I would think that this embargo is dumb. But here's another thing. Everybody talks about various lobbies and special interest groups in this country. You hear about the Israeli lobby, the Saudi Arabian lobby, this lobby, that lobby. And I'm half Hispanic, and I can speak of this. I'm half Puerto Rican, but there's a lot of people in Cuba who are deeply right wing. That deeply right wing, deeply Republican. This is part of the reason why Republicans do fairly well in Florida. And had it not been for this Cuba situation, I was sort of predict that Florida would be a blue state. But the thing about it is, a lot of the Cuban Americans who are right wing that lives in Florida, and I'm not saying every Cuban American living in Florida, I'm not even saying every white Cuban living in Florida, but mostly white right wing Cubans living in Florida um, were connected to wealthy families back home during the days of Batista. What was his name? Fulgencio Batista. And and they they were part of the problem in Cuba that made the Castro regime appealing to the masses to begin with. I mean, and the thing about it is that under Fulgencio Batista, and I am embarrassed being half Hispanic, having a tough time with names. His regime coddled organized crime from the United States. The mob had a lot of economic interests invested in Cuba. Corporations such as the International Telephone Telegraph Company gave Batista a golden telephone as a gift for, allowing telephone rates, for example, to rise to ridiculous levels back in the 1950s when Batista was in charge. And but the Batista government murdered 20,000 political dissidents. They turned the country into a police state, and it was a very authoritarian society. Do not think for a second that prior to Fidel Castro coming into power, that Cuba was some kind of democracy. It wasn't. It was a U.S. backed dictatorship, and Batista was a dictator. And think about it is that when the Cuban Revolution took place in 1959, it looked like the U.S. was uncertain about what kind of a person Fidel Castro would be. Was he a populist, agrarian populist leader, or was he a communist? And they couldn't decide, and the Cold War was going on, and eventually, when Castro government were nationalizing industries that I would say were justified to be nationalized because some of these industries and companies were abusing the people. The United States decided to go and make life a living hell for him, and then his elite just went to the Soviet Union. Now, if the United States was smart, the United States would have found a way to at least be on friendly terms with Castro, or a best case scenario to be an ally of the United States for the U.S., or worst case scenario, which wouldn't be a bad case scenario for the United States, that he could be Latin America, Joseph Broz Tito. Talking about Tito, Yugoslavia. And I will go into Yugoslavia in another commentary. Side note that I'm not a Marxist Leninist in any way, shape, or form. But if there was a communist government that I've ever admired and would insist that the United States follow, it would have been something like Yugoslavia under Field Marshal Joseph Broz Tito. I consider him, when he was alive, a great man, and I urge each and every one of you, if you're not familiar with Tito, look him up. That's one of my little aside things in this commentary. But getting back to what I was saying about Castro, so by 1962, the Kennedy administration really put the locks on and had a full-fledged economic war on Cuba. It was a economic blockade, and for all the countries, whether they were the Soviet Union or democratic countries that wanted to deal with Cuba, going through and defying the blockade, I say good for them, because I'm not going to sit there and back the United States when they do immoral crap. Now, I'm not going to sit there and just be against the United States just to be against the United States either. That's dumb. When the United States do bad, I'm going to say they do bad. When the United States do good, I am going to commend the United States doing good. And that's how I operate. But the thing about it is, with this embargo, it was relaxed somewhat during the Jimmy Carter years, and then Reagan kind of brought it back full steam in the early '80s, and it more or less stayed. And there's been debate over the years whether to keep the embargo going or not. And when George W. Bush became president in 2001, one more reason I think George W. Bush was one of the worst presidents we ever had, was that he imposed a fine for people who went to Cuba, uh, because the United States apparently forbids American travel to Cuba. And apparently, if you go to Cuba and you come back, the United States will fine you $7,500. George W. Bush, this is what I think of your $7,500 fine right there. That is what I think of the $7,500 fine of George W. Bush. Spin on it, shrub. But anyway, um, getting back to what I was saying. Um, this embargo has been terrible. It's a war crime against the people of Cuba. Never mind the leadership of Cuba. I am talking about the Cuban people themselves. I am talking about the Cuban people themselves. It is a crime against the people. That's what's happened. And one of the better things that happened under Obama, he started to relax the travel restrictions to Cuba and tried to actually have some positive relations with Cuba. Then Donald Trump, dumbass Donald Trump, went and tightened the restrictions again. So I hope that Joe Biden will find it in his heart to go and relax these restrictions, or just flat out end the embargo. Cuba is not a threat to the United States in any way, shape, or fashion. And they just need to end this ridiculous embargo. And all the more reason to oppose this embargo is that this embargo is strongly supported by Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, a neoconservative scumbag if there ever was one. And Ted Cruz of Texas, another neoconservative scumbag, both Cuban American and both ideologically driven, and both. If you want to compare authoritarianism and everything, believe me, under a Rubio presidency or under a Ted Cruz presidency, we would see authoritarianism too, because they are authoritarian to the core. Um, and I know what I'm talking about. But as I said, this is not because of the Cuban system. This is because of U.S. bullying of Cuba. That's what it comes down to. And the United States needs to put an end to this damn stupid, inhumane, and criminal embargo against the people of Cuba. That's where I stand. Call it any way you want it. This is where I stand. If you like what you heard, press like and comment. If you disagree, comment anyway. We'll have a conversation. Feel free to share the content on this channel. As a First Amendment absolutist, it's my duty to inform you that if you have a platform, please utilize it, because we're the muckrakers of our time. Uh, Also, very importantly, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you're kept up to date. And once again, I am American Social Democracy. Peace. Class struggle yesterday, class struggle today, class struggle tomorrow, and class struggle until we achieve full economic and social justice for all in our time.